When we talk about cloud visibility examples, what we're going to talk about here is the ability to have flexibility, again, as we've talked about, to choose where you deploy your management component. Also, you're going to be choosing your cloud provider, and then you want to choose how you're going to get that visibility control. You should be able to mix and match these. You shouldn't be locked into one particular way to manage this. You shouldn't be locked into one particular cloud service provider or locked into one way to get your cloud visibility and your control. So that is key, is to be able to have options. And that's what we're going to be explaining in some of the subsequent slides here. We're going to be talking about the various cloud visibility options. So for some people, an agentless environment may be their goal. For others, perhaps they don't want to set up security policies inside of the different cloud vendors' consoles. That's where the cloud connector comes into play. And then also the virtual sensor component is a way to get visibility by deploying a Genian sensor into any cloud environment to detect information about the nodes, IP-enabled nodes that are present in the environment. So we'll take a look at our first visibility example here. So here you pick where to deploy your policy server. In this case, we'll use the Genian's cloud as an example. Then you're going to actually enable the cloud connector inside of Genian's for your specific cloud provider. And then what happens is the connector will make the connection to the actual cloud service provider, and will report back information about all those devices, all the nodes rather, that are enabled in the cloud. So what this allows you to do is pull the visibility out of your cloud service provider's environment into your NAC environment to view it through your NAC console. This means that you'll have information about new nodes, IP-enabled nodes coming online in your cloud environment without having to separately log in to your cloud provider's console. So you may think that it sounds very complicated to configure that and to facilitate that, but in reality, it's not. So the cloud connector configuration is very simple. All you do is add a cloud provider into your Genian ZTNAC console with the appropriate access information. You enable the collector option, and then instantly it will start to gather information about nodes, IP-enabled nodes that are enabled in that environment. So in this particular example, we're talking about an AWS environment. And in the AWS environment, once you provide the appropriate credentials, Genian ZTNAC, regardless of where it's hosted, it could be hosted in the Genian's cloud, it could be hosted in Azure, it could be on-prem, will actually go out and pull information, detailed information, public IP, private IP, network address information, even security group information back from all of your IP-enabled, in this case, EC2 instances in the AWS environment. Another cloud visibility option is using the virtual sensor option. So again, you choose where to put your policy server. We'll go with on-prem for this example. Then you deploy your sensor. So we're switched to Azure. So now you can take a virtual sensor and deploy it into Azure. And the Genian NAC virtual sensor will detect information about the VMs in Azure and report it back to your policy server. So this allows you to actually collect information in a different cloud service provider environment. This option does not rely on a cloud connector. This option only requires that you deploy a virtual sensor in your Azure environment, and it will report information back. So this is all about options. Just like on-prem with on-prem network access control, you should have lots of different options, because you're going to have different environments. So this demonstrates a separate option to be able to get visibility out of your cloud environment and into your network access control console, regardless of what that environment is like. And the third example for visibility is going to be utilizing an agent. So for this example, we'll have our policy server hosted in AWS because, again, it's not relevant where that is. Then you're going to have a Google Compute instance that's inside of Google Cloud, and you install an agent on that instance. The agent collects information and reports it back to the policy server. So this is a third option. This option, of course, does not rely on a connector to Google Cloud. This option does not rely on you deploying a sensor into Google Cloud. This is just applying an agent onto your Google Compute instances, and then the agent will collect all that information and it will send that information back to your policy server. Again, using these different cloud service providers are for illustrative purposes only. The goal here is you should be able to mix and match this to meet your environment and your needs. So ultimately, what we end up with is a single pane of glass inside of your Genie and ZT NAC console. And inside of here, you'll be able to see information for IP-enabled nodes that are in all of your different cloud service provider environments. Now, you may not have 3 cloud service provider environments. You may only have 1. Still, the value add and the proposition is there. You get to glean information about nodes, new nodes that are coming online in your cloud environment real time in your network access control solution, which allows you then to determine what kind of policies you want to apply. Again, this is visibility you're going to get without ever having to log in to your cloud service provider console. If you do have multiple cloud service providers, it's just that much more valuable because you're combining this information in one place for visibility about all these different nodes. Now we'll talk about how to control these nodes once we've detected them. So we're going to match a node on whatever enforcement policy. Again, your policy server could be hosted anywhere. This first example, we're going to use the cloud connector to issue a command. And in this case, we're going to shut down the instance. So for this example, we have AWS EC2s that we have previously detected through the cloud connector. Once we've detected them, we're going to match them through your enforcement policy. So now your enforcement policy is in your NAC system, not inside of your cloud service provider. So you don't have to be an AWS expert. You can leverage the familiarity of your existing NAC solution in the UI to configure a policy and enforce it. Once a violation has occurred, an unauthorized EC2, for example, that instance is automatically shut down using the CLI integration between the Genie and ZT NAC and AWS. So really the automation and the integration with cloud service providers is key at any solution you look at to help you secure cloud environments, especially if you're looking for a third-party solution outside of your cloud environments. Needs to be able to integrate and automate this kind of functionality. Example number 2, in this example, what we're going to see is, of course, we've got a node policy match that has to take place. This will be an on-prem policy server, just for an example. Then we're going to go ahead and do the connector again. And this time, instead of shutting an instance down, we're just going to modify a security group. So this is really the equivalent of being able to, if you think about historically VLAN steering, or being able to switch to a quarantine VLAN, or being able to restrict access, or be able to facilitate segmentation, and how that was historically done on on-prem networks. What would happen is you would do a VLAN or an ACL, and that would be applied on the network equipment through technologies like Radius or SNMP. Instead now, you're actually using the cloud connector into your cloud service provider environment, and you are actually manipulating the access that individual cloud instances have dynamically and in real time to match your policy. So this is a very powerful integration. It allows you to restrict and segment access to these EC2s. This can all be pre-configured in your Genie and ZTNAC, and you don't have to log into your AWS console. You don't have to be an expert on how to configure all the different security groups. And this is a very valuable tool to have one-stop shopping on where you can actually configure these policies instead of configuring them in multiple places, which really is one of the biggest challenges with cloud adoption, is how do you actually control access in an automated fashion. For this control example, on the last example here, we'll talk about using the agent. So again, we're going to switch our policy server to AWS because it doesn't really matter where that resides. And we'll go back to Google Cloud as the cloud provider that we're wanting to control instances on. The agent's installed. When a policy failure occurs, the agent modifies the firewall on the Google Cloud instance in real time. So ultimately what this ends up being is the same concept where you've automated the security policy. The cloud provider is a different cloud provider because you've got Google Cloud instances you're looking to control, but you're only configuring these policies inside of one place, which is your Genie and ZTNAC UI. And then you're able to, in real time, without using any kind of a connector into Google Cloud, you're able to actually leverage the agent to quarantine or restrict access through outbound firewall rules on that Google Compute instance. So again, you're able to do this without having to set this policy inside of your Google Cloud console.